We'll start with questions. We'll use the mic so everybody can hear. So who would like to start?
Where you had you made two choices, one for the party.
Oh, that was not single transferable. That was MMP, multi-member.
MMP, yeah.
Yeah.
MMP. We voted one vote for the party, one for a representative.
Right.
That still leaves that nasty strategic voting. When you're trying to vote for your representative, you still are faced with that same nasty issue of strategic voting, of not trying to elect the party you don't like and having to...
You mean locally?
The New Zealand one, where they're electing something like 7 representatives from a much larger riding, seemed to eliminate a lot of that. But when you're trying to only elect one person for the representative, it leaves that strategic voting, which is the nasty part of our current system.
Okay, so the answer that I have for you is under MMP, you're using one side of the ballot to choose the party and the other side to choose your local representative. So when you're choosing the party, if you like the party, you don't have to vote strategically on that part because that doesn't determine on the local part. Yeah. Well, you could, yeah. Or you could elect multiple people within a larger riding. That's the other option. And then you would be, the disadvantage would be a larger riding, the advantage would be exactly what you're saying. But you're right. It does, nothing is perfect, and that would be a possible disadvantage to that. But still, even if you voted strategically in your riding, if you gave your party vote to the party that you sincerely support, then that party would be guaranteed that number of seats nationally. So if the guy in your riding wasn't elected, then you would still be filling that proportion from the party list.
Yeah, my problem I have with this party list idea is it strikes me a lot like the Senate, where the parties pick their bagmen on the list to pick from, and you don't get to vote for your representative.
The system which was defeated in the Ontario referendum was a closed list system, which is what you're describing, where the voters don't actually get to pick which guys on that party list get to go to number 1. The system that the Law Commission of Canada has recommended is the one that has open party lists. So you can rank your candidates within that party list. So you can choose which one you want of those party candidates. There's so many ways to do it. I don't want to get into all the nitty-gritty here, but there are open lists under MMP and closed lists. So that problem could be addressed with an open list.
So I just want to say, I think, and New Zealand was MMP. So in the presentation this afternoon, Gisela showed the New Zealand ballot where they decided to switch their systems. The first part of the ballot was, do you want first past the post or PR? End of story. And it was something like 84% was yes. The second part of the ballot was, if you want PR, then which system would you prefer? So it was a 2-part process, because I think part of the problem with the defeated referendums is people got tied up in what type. I mean, they agreed they wanted PR, but they, so that's this. Okay, there. Was that
a binding referendum?
No, it wasn't, but it was, the results were so lopsided that they changed.
New Zealand used a 2-step process. In 1992, they did this referendum, which was an indicative referendum. It was not binding. The question they asked in the first half was, should New Zealand keep first past the post? And they gave you simple options, keep it or change to another system. And you can see the percentages of the results on the right there. So the vote to change to another system was basically 85%. And the second part, this is all one piece of paper. You're voting on this at the same time. This was all part of the same referendum. Part B of that ballot was, if New Zealand were to change to another voting system, which system would you choose? And they had 4 systems that had been shortlisted. And we saw the video for the MMP system, the PV system, the STV. We didn't bother with supplemental member. That's not a very popular system around the world. It hasn't been recommended in Canada. So basically what they did here was say, do we want to change? And if we do change, which one do you guys like better? And the government took responsibility for educating people about the various systems. And the next year, they went back and they had a simple referendum that said, a simple referendum between first past the post and MMP, which had come out on top here. And MMP won that. When this was done, there was an agreement that they would review it after a certain number of elections. So the first election in New Zealand under MMP was done in 1996. And they then did another referendum, 2011, here we are. Right? Yeah. Where they said, should we keep MMP? Now that we've had this experience under the alternate system, is it better or not? And this one did pass as well. So, two-part system. This is what I think we've done wrong in Canada. We keep saying, this is the system for us, and we never ask the question, do you want to fix our system? Because most of us do want to fix our system. We quibble about which system we want to replace first past the post with.
Questions?
I found many of your arguments compelling. I want to go to the next step in the process, in that you are focusing on the legislative branch of our parliament. We are a Westminster system of governance as well, where the executive branch is responsible essentially to the members, to the legislative branch. Under one of these systems, which more or less is going to guarantee a minority government, how do you deal with the creation of an executive branch?
So the structure doesn't change. We're not changing anything in Parliament. We're just changing the way that we elect those people. So all of the current structure of Parliament isn't affected. All we're doing is changing the ballot that we use to elect those representatives. They would have the exact same responsibilities that they have now.
But that leads to instability.
Okay, there's the question. So
Instability in that you feel that it would lead to instability because they have to work together to get anything done?
Basically, yes, evidence proves that that's difficult.
Well, you might be of that opinion, but the research shows that, 85% of the most developed countries in the world use proportional representations. Most of those are operating with coalitions all the time. We have this idea in Canada that coalitions don't work, but they work well in most of the world.
I accept that, but I think when you showed your map of the world, and those countries that first past the post, they're basically, as you pointed out, most of them were part of the British Empire.
Right.
And they have basically Westminster systems as well, where the party with the largest number of seats essentially gets to form the executive branch. And certainly that person, the leader of that party, becomes the prime minister. I acknowledge that wasn't where it started, but that's where it is today. How do these systems that are not Westminster systems select their executive branch? Because I think a lot of them actually elect their president.
You may be right about that. I think Germany might do that. I'm not an expert on every country's electoral system, but again, I'm going to use the New Zealand example. They have exactly the same system as we do, and it's working there. So they don't elect a prime minister either. It's the leader of the biggest party or the party that joins with whichever party to form the government. So you may be right. Most of them might have a system that actually elects a president, but it certainly doesn't have to be that way.
But the question I want to ask is what's the next phase that, how do you see going into this next election? What is the game plan for getting this to occur?
The simple fact is that in order to make proportional representation a reality in Canada, it has to pass the vote in the House. So we have to elect enough MPs who will vote yes to proportional representation. And we're at kind of a hopeful time right now. We are closer than we have been in many years, which is why Fair Vote Canada is doing this push right now. You may be aware that in December there was a free vote in the House of Commons on a new Democratic motion to institute proportional representation. I shouldn't say free vote. It was a vote, and some parties whipped their members. The Conservatives voted as a bloc, no. The NDP and the Green Party MPs all voted in favor. The Liberal Party did not whip their MPs. They let them vote according to their conscience or according to what their constituents wanted, and that was a tiny majority for proportional representation. So I believe the number was 16, correct me if I'm wrong later, Cindy. I think the number was 16 out of 30 that voted in favor of proportional representation, and that was on the NDP motion. So if we can elect enough MPs who will support proportional representation when it comes up to a vote, we can make it happen. If the Conservatives win another majority, it's not going to happen because they flat out refuse to talk about it.
Great segue. So I'm going to bring up our candidates, and you can hear for yourselves their positions on that.
I'm so pleased to see everyone here this evening. My name is Jackie Shangra, and I'm representing the New Democrats. And before I begin, I would also like to acknowledge that we are on unceded Okanagan territory. We are guests of the Okanagan Nation. I'd also like to express my gratitude to the Renewing Democracy Group, to Sue, and also to Greg Crockett, who spent an enormous amount of time making this possible. Thank you to Gisela for that very informative presentation. Let me start by asking you some questions. I have a feeling I know the answer to some of these questions already. Tell me, are you tired of the mudslinging that's happening in the House of Commons? Yes. Do you want to see our politicians working together to find real solutions to make our country a better place to live? Yes. I thought so. Do you want to live in a country where every single vote counts? Yes. As the official opposition, the NDP is fully in support of mixed member proportional representation, as you heard about already. The NDP has studied this. They've been in support of it for decades. Along with the commissions that have been conducted nationally, we are taking the bold and unwavering step to commit to making sure that 2015 will be the last unfair election in Canada. This is not about doing what will benefit one political party. This is about doing what will benefit all Canadians. This is a principled stance that's based on research and evidence collecting, and making an informed decision based on that evidence. We urgently need to renew and restore our democracy. In our present electoral system, too many votes are discarded and don't count. We've seen that. We've participated in it. Our hands were up when we were talking about those orphan votes. Too many of us don't have a real say in our own governance. As I've been speaking with people about tonight's session, I've had the chance to hear directly from folks about their experience. And one person in particular, her story stuck out for me. Her name's Megan. And I met Megan in a college classroom just a couple days ago. And Megan talked to me about her relationship with the political process, not without a hint of futility and cynicism in her own voice. Megan would be described as someone who's actually politically astute. She follows local and national politics. She pays attention to what's going on. And yet, when it comes time for elections, she feels like she doesn't want to participate because her vote, as we've heard, is wasted. It's my perspective that we need a system, an electoral system, that renews Megan's faith in our democracy. And so we need to create a new system around proportional representation. We want a system where every vote counts. Did you know that in 2011, raise your hand if you knew this, 57,000 of us voted in 2011. In this riding. Now that means that at least half of the people who are eligible to vote did not vote. That is an enormous number of people. And we're starting to hear some of the reasons why people are not voting, are not participating in a very important part of our democratic process. After decades of cronyism, abuses of power, floor crossings, corrupt backroom deals, we have lost sight of the transformative potential that our democracy can and should hold. Not just for influencing how our country is run, thank you, but for how citizens and elected officials can work together to be innovative difference makers and shape our communities into better places to live, to actually make a difference. I am standing here today asking you to join me to make this historic change to our electoral system. We together will be the voice that Canada needs now. I'm not going to repeat all of the wonderful things that come about when we change the electoral system to a proportional representative system, because you've heard that, and Gisela did an excellent job doing that. But when I saw that list in its entirety, I was frankly surprised at the amount of change that an electoral system change can bring about. But the reality is, when we empower people, when everyone's voices matter, it's incredible what can be achieved. So again, I'm inviting you to join me to become a difference maker. Together, we will put unfair elections behind us forever. Thank you.
Well, I'll start much the same way, and I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. There is a lot to do on a Tuesday night in Vernon, but appreciate people coming out to take the time because they care about our democracy. They care about our voting system. And thank you so much to Renewing Democracy and to those people that put in all the work to bring this together tonight. And to Gisela for your very excellent presentation. I've sat through it twice and I'm prepared to do it again tomorrow night in Salmon Arm. So for those of you who know people in Salmon Arm that want to be informed about the ways that we can change our democratic system and our voting system, please let them know. 7 o'clock tomorrow in Salmon Arm at Okanagan College. So I'm going to start with a question too. Who here would like to see the voting system reformed?
A lot of us.
Thank you. And who here would like to see us stick with first past the post? No one. Interesting. Because many people in the BC STV vote did want to stick with first past the post. So my story and why I'm here tonight involves being passionate about politics, but never seeing myself as a candidate, never seeing that I would actually be standing for office. But over the last 5 years, I have become increasingly concerned about what's going on with the Harper Conservative government, and I'm concerned about our democracy. And that brings me here to support democratic reform. The Liberals are very much for restoring the trust in our democracy and for reforming democracy, reforming the electoral system. I was in Montreal at the Liberal Policy Convention in February in 2014, when most of my friends were actually going away to Mexico or somewhere south other than Lumbee. And so we passed a resolution that was put to the floor by the Liberal leader, Mr. Trudeau and caucus. And it's a priority resolution number 31, Restoring Trust in Canada's Democracy. The resolution that pertains to tonight's lecture is resolved that immediately after the next election, an all-party process be instituted involving expert assistance and citizen participation to report to Parliament within 12 months with recommendations for electoral reforms, including, but without limitation, a preferential ballot and/or a form of proportional representation to represent Canadians more fairly and to serve Canada better. That's what I'm standing for. I'm not here to say this is the form that we must adopt, handed down, mixed member proportional representation. I think that happens to be a very good form. But I like the Liberal policies of being inclusive and consultative, to seek all input from citizens groups as well as all parties to make the decision of what will be the best way to reform our voting system for many, many years to come. It's a big decision and we need to get it right. So in electing me as a representative of you, I will advocate passionately to change the voting system, but I do want to hear what form that might take. There's more to democratic reform as well, and I think it's important to know that the Liberal Party wants to make changes in many ways, including fewer whipped votes, and the vote that Gisela was talking about in December over supporting the NDP's mixed member proportional representation model was an example of a free vote. And you can be assured that I will be advocating for that. We need to stop the omnibus bills. We need to fix the Fair Elections Act, as Mr. Harper has called it. So democracy is a huge and important issue. However, it's not, reforming the voting system is not the only reason to make your decision when you go to the polls. You have the choice is yours to figure out which party will get the job done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for attending, everybody. It's great to see so many smiling faces out there. I'm Dave Smith. I'm your Green Party candidate. And thanks also to Fair Vote Canada for putting on this event. And Gisela for an excellent presentation. Now, the first thing that I'd like to say is that the three of us up here for you today all know each other. We've all chatted with each other. We all are in broad agreement with many of the issues that are around democratic reform. So, in a way, we're rivals. In a way, we're a team. And for those conservative supporters out there, I don't think there are too many out here tonight, but I would just like to leave you with a thought. And that thought is, if we had proportional representation many years ago, the Progressive Conservative Party would still exist. The Progressive Conservative Party, rather than the Reform Party that we have today. One more thought about proportional representation is I believe it's critical in this changing world. And I'm up here because of my belief that environment is the number one issue that we need to face in the world going forward. In this modern world, things are changing so quickly, and if we are stuck, as they are in the States, with a two-party system that is calcified to some degree, they just are not capable of making the adjustments that we require in this modern world. We need a system in which new parties with new ideas can bubble up to the surface. The Green Party, of course, you'll all recognize the fact that we are the losers when it comes to strategic voting under the current system. So we're tremendously in support of proportional representation. We believe that that would, not only for the Green Party, but any other party that can muster its, say, 5% of the vote, that new parties with new ideas will have an opportunity to bubble up and will have a world that can evolve in a more dynamic fashion. So that's, to my mind, that's one of the main benefits of proportional representation. Now, as the other two have mentioned as well, there's a lot more to democratic reform than just proportional representation. We've got many issues that we need to deal with. I've got at the back of the room, if any of you care to pick it up before you leave, I've got a short list of the policies that the Green Party has brought forward on the issue of democratic reform. Democratic reform is critical to environmental issues. Elizabeth May, in her first term in Parliament, was surprised to find that without democratic reform, that her ability to move forward on what she perceived as environmental necessities was severely hampered. And she switched her focus to some extent to say we need democratic reform first and foremost before we can deal with some of the pressing issues on the environmental front that we're going to have to face. Proportional representation also will go a long ways towards bringing the parties back together again, where they've got an opportunity to have inter-party caucuses, to reduce the acrimony. It's a bringing together of parties to allow them to work together again. So a number of other important issues, I think, in terms of democracy is the bodies, Auditor General, the scientific review bodies. These bodies have all been muzzled to some extent. Those bodies need to be brought back into a position of power where they can report independently to Parliament. So there's a lot of fronts we need to fight here. And as I say, within this group together, we're all in it together. We'll have to duke it out to some extent when the election comes. The Green Party is in favor of any way of cooperating on a riding-by-riding basis in the upcoming election, possibly to bring single candidates forward in some kind of acceptable balance between the parties. Job number one is to get the Conservatives out of power. Thank you.
Renewing Democracy calls itself a nonpartisan group, and we are that. We did invite the Conservatives. They declined again, and we must remember that conservative is a spectrum. And so I believe there's a lot of disenfranchised conservative voters out there as well. And so we want to keep our membership wide. We have Greens, Liberals, and Progressives on our committee. So, and we're open for progressive conservatives of any stripe. Okay. So questions? If you could keep your questions short, and if you might indicate who you would like to answer that question, and we'll time 2 minutes on the answers. Now, I'm kind of thinking, yes, and if you have another question for Gisela, she's there. So I've had one hand, I've had two so far. Okay.
Thank you. This is a question for you, Cindy. You talked about the votes we've had before, and you're going to do more votes. When we had a vote in British Columbia, we were told they're writing up this thing, you're going to be asked if you want proportional representation. And I was so excited. And everybody was going out to vote, and I got there and said, do you want first past the post or this single transferable vote? There was a choice. It didn't say, do you want to change your voting system, yes or no? It said you had to take this one particular kind, or you had to take what we have. So, I'm just saying, I like what you said, that, you're into looking at all different kinds, but when you do look at different kinds, make sure you ask people first. Don't say, first past the post or this, because that's really stopped us. Just one thought. Do you want to respond to that, Cindy?
Well, just to say, thank you for that comment. Thank you for that comment, and it was the first that I had seen the New Zealand ballot was in Gisela's presentation, and that made a heck of a lot of sense, and it was an indicative referendum rather than a binding referendum, which made sense still. Thanks.
Usually with this kind of issue in particular, it requires an awful lot of education, and I don't think the Conservatives are not interested in this issue and would not offer any money. So how would this be financed to educate the general Canadian public outside of the government? And how would you finance that? Well, to whoever would like to answer.
So maybe about a minute each per part.
I'll just do a very quick one if you like.
Okay, so take it across the
Okay.
table, but very short.
So again, the only thing I can say is it's not going to happen under a Conservative majority because they have stated flat out not interested. So the only way that we can start the discussion on how it's going to happen and possibly put money into education is if we have those votes in the House of Commons. Again, use your vote. That's the only tool that we have right now.
Thank you for your question. Since 2013, the Democratic Reform critic, Craig Scott, has been touring Canada. And he has been participating in exactly what you're describing as an educational process and engaging people, and also in partnership with Fair Vote Canada, and looking at ways to bring this information to people. And I think with events like this and with groups like Renewing Democracy who come together around several issues, we can begin this educational process. And I think when people are so galvanized, like you yourselves are, the education comes a little bit more quickly. So this is something that I think is very hopeful. And the system itself is not that difficult once we turn our minds to understanding the options and what it represents, the potential that it represents for transforming engagement is tremendous. So step by step, but each of us can take some responsibility for doing that.
1 minute.
I'll be short, which is a sight gag when you see me standing up. We have to get rid of the Conservative government and put one of the parties that will change the system in power. Then it can happen.
Amen to that. And I would just like to add that the group of us here and in many other constituencies around the country are trying to put some pressure on their parties in Ottawa to do something cooperative within the ridings on the next election. We're definitely in danger of the Conservatives coming back in again with a 35 or 36% of the vote and having another majority. The parties, the three parties you see here in front of you, are going to have to get it together and figure out how we're going to cooperate at the next election.
One thing with the mixed member proportional representation system that New Zealand has, you in fact have two different types of members. You've got some that represent constituencies and others who are list candidates.
Yeah.
So in fact, some politicians have a lot more work to do than others. If you're representing a constituency, you've got a lot of constituency work, which the list candidates wouldn't have. I just wonder if you know about the New Zealand system, do they treat the politicians differently, the elected representatives, if they represent a constituency or their list?
Good question.
In terms of workload, and also, are list candidates allowed to be prime minister or cabinet ministers? Do they make any differentiation between the two types of elected people in that one?
Yeah. Really good question.
So in answer to your first question, which was regarding local accountability, basically. I'm not 100% sure how the New Zealand system deals with that. I do know that in the system that the Law Commission recommended for Canada, you actually do have geographic accountability on the list candidates as well. So you would have smaller ridings, for example, within BC, but you would also have a list for a region like BC. So even though they aren't representing as small an area as the other candidates, they are still responsible to a certain geographic area. The other question you asked was whether a list candidate could become Prime Minister. As far as I know, yes. Once they're elected, they're pretty much equal. And your question is a very valid question. There is some concern about creating two classes of MPs, one, as you say, constituency reps, and the other ones, these party list ones. The Law Commission spends a good deal of time in their report talking about that. It's available online, and their basic conclusion is that they would be slightly different, but not enough to make a significant impact. They would all function pretty much the same as MPs in the House.
Good evening and thank you. So here's the solution for Gisela. Now, you said the Conservatives aren't participating. Forget them. But you know that new lad that Harper has elevated to cabinet, Poilevre? Send him a letter and you go head to head with him in a televised CPAC presentation or something. Are you kidding? You win hands down. And don't forget all this riding by riding. That's not good work because they've been told not to participate. Like, don't dare participate because they wouldn't want to put somebody up against you. But Poilevre, he couldn't refuse to go head to head with you. No, you more than, are you kidding? No, you should do that. This is who you, and that's who you go after. That's who you go after because he's going to take the bait. So I think you just should get going on that.
So you're talking about the follow-up referendum? Yeah. New Zealand managed to adopt a proportional representation system, and they managed to keep it in the follow-up referendum. What happened in between was not always pretty. So the first election in 1996 under the new system was a very close result. It took 2 months for the parties to form a coalition government. There was a lot of very messy party jumping, and the government collapsed within short order. They didn't know how to function with the new system. It took a little while, but by the early 2000s, they were doing quite well with the system. So the first time was 1996. I'd say the first government after that was everybody going, oh my God, what have we done? After that, it smoothed out. Some people liked first past the post better. Maybe it was easier. They felt it was less confusing. That's the only thing I can offer is they did have a very messy experience there in their first one. But from all reports, it's been smoother since then. So it's not always easy to change.
I'd like to thank everybody for doing this. And I have one simple question, but it's not simple. Who becomes Prime Minister under that system?
The MMP system to which you're referring has two parts to the ballot. One is you're electing your local representative. The other one you're electing, the first one you're choosing the party of your choice. The second one you're voting for your local representative. Both of them, in order to become MPs, have to be elected. So they are both elected. The party makes the list. You get to choose which guys on that list you want to put into Parliament. That's an open list. That's what's been recommended for us. So all of those people would be elected with the normal threshold of votes. And they then, if there is a majority, which we know isn't all that likely, but if there is a majority, the leader of the party that got the majority would be automatically the Prime Minister. Unless the other parties, and this is the same situation we have now. There's nothing preventing the opposition parties from uniting and forming a government if they have more votes than the...
If one doesn't have a majority, then they
they'd have to work it out. That's why it took New Zealand 2 months that first time round. The parties have to figure out some sort of governance agreement if there is going to be a coalition.
So in effect, then, we may not be voting for Prime Minister.
We don't vote for Prime Minister at all now. We vote for a party and a person locally. That party chooses the Prime Minister. Yeah. So what you're saying is correct. We wouldn't be voting for the Prime Minister. Yeah, we aren't now either. Yeah. Under an open list, and again, there are other systems, a closed list party, you wouldn't be electing which people on that, but under an open list, the party puts together the list, you vote among the members of that list who you want.
For a region?
For whatever the size of the constituency is. So in BC, I think they said there would be 14 altogether. 9 of them would be local representatives. 5 of them would be for the province as regional party people. I think I'm getting that right. But again, if you want to know the details of a specific system, you need to look at where that specific system was recommended. All of them are a little bit different. But in order to be elected, in order to be sitting as MPs, they have to be elected. The party can put them on the list, but that doesn't elect them.
I'm curious to know if everybody here would support online voting. And how they feel about that, the candidates. My reason for that is I've got a lot of people that couldn't get out to vote, whether it was weather-related, illness. There are some people that live in remote regions. I'm First Nations, so I can tell you that there are a lot of First Nations reserves that have a very hard time getting into vote. I believe they have a right like anybody else. So I'm curious to know how you feel about online voting. There are some other countries around the world that do it. So people say, well, how could you not cheat on it? I think simply if you've got a social insurance number and once it's loaded in, and like anything else, when you send an e-transfer, you confirm, you can't do it again, you're done. So the same SIM number can't be used a second time.
So very quickly, anything that increases participation, I think, is something we need to truly consider, as long as it can be created with integrity. And like you said, there are ways, we have some very smart people in Elections Canada that can help us with that. But I think the most important thing that we need to be considering is how we can increase participation, make every voice heard.
Yeah, I do support exploring online voting and agree the integrity of the system is extremely important, but we're doing an awful lot more online all the time and not having that huge problem with integrity of online, and anything we can do to get people out to vote is what we should be doing, including having online along with polls and the advanced polls now any option. And just to point out that one of the things that happened in the quote Fair Elections Act was that the Elections Canada no longer has that role of promoting voter turnout and getting people to the polls. A huge change, and one that the Liberals are committed to reversing.
I'm enthusiastically in favor of online voting. The youth vote has dropped, it's below 40%. I think that will bring people back. It's an opportunity for them to do some online research at the same time. The Green Party actually has used that system, and we did it to establish some policy updates several years ago. Every individual that was eligible to vote within the Green Party was given a password. Social insurance number probably wouldn't work very well. Anyone can use your number, but anyhow, so you get mailed a password, use the password. Once you've used it once, it's done. I would guess you'd have to keep ahead of the hackers on a regular basis, but I think it's very doable, and it's the wave of the future.
how we elected a
And
leader.
I would like to thank our three candidates who are here on a cooperative basis and, perhaps not with full, the national executives are perhaps not quite as enthusiastic in some cases. And here on the local riding, we are cutting edge folks. Thank you for coming.